On the other hand, you are not free from my clutches yet, women. You also have responsibility in this. Women. Need I say more? Segment. No, I'm just kidding. Segment's not over. So basically, something just come up on my timeline on Twitter. I mean, my band Twitter, of course, is what I meant. But anyway, memes aside, I've come across a thing on my timeline, and it's interesting. It sparked some interesting discourse, and I want to talk about that. We're going to do a little discourse. So this woman, many are saying that she is in fact a woman, and her name is Alexandra Hunt. And she is as you can see, public health activist, grassroots organizer, soccer coach, very important that one, 2022 Philadelphia congressional candidate. Really all we knew was the soccer coach though. So let's learn a little bit about Alexandra. Now, I don't know if it says it on this page, but I know that she also used to be a sex worker. We'll get into that in a minute. Alexandra Hunt is a public health researcher, a girls soccer coach, an advocate for social, racial, economic, and environmental justice, and an organizer. She is daughter of 2 teachers and a sister to a twin brother. Alexandra's twin brother grew up with a learning disability. Seeing the systemic obstacles her brother faced inspired Alexandra to become an advocate and challenge barriers on the basis of race, gender, class, and ability. In 2022, Alexandra ran for Congress on a progressive platform because she believes our politicians should fight for systemic change, ensuring equal opportunity and justice for all. She is now continuing her advocacy and continuing to work with community groups and organizations to bring about a more compassionate, just, and fair Philadelphia for all. Her sister, just like me. So, she sounds pretty cool. She sounds pretty based. She sounds pretty pog. Let's take a look at what's going on. Alexandra posted this, which sparked many a discourse. Young men aren't having enough sex, she says. Nearly a third of men under 30 have not had sex, and a higher percent do not have as much sex as they'd like. Not exactly surprising, but this kind of statistic is a sign of much deeper problems. So there's an entire thread here, but I'm not going to waste time on it because we have, courtesy of Tina2 in the chat, a much longer statement from her. So we'll just leave it at this. But I do want to add, Twitter is doing this nice little neat thing beneath some posts now. You will notice it says young men driving a decline in sex. Share of men and women between ages 18 and 30 reporting no sex in the past year, right? So it's inaccurate. It is inaccurate. So what she said is inaccurate based on this data alone. I don't know if we have exact statistics on what she's claimed, but what she's claimed is not an accurate reading of what this is. It says the legend on this chart says it shows the share of people who have reported not having sex in the last year, not those who are virgins. This tweet's claim is not made in the original article. Let's take a look at that. The share of Americans not having sex has reached a record high. More than ever, Americans aren't having sex. Percentage of Americans reporting no sex, monthly sex, or sex weekly or more in the past year. So we have no sex. Okay, so red line's no sex, yellow's monthly, and blue is weekly or more. So we have a little under 50% weekly or more. Yellow is monthly at 35%. And then no sex is 19 to 23%. And that's those who are reporting not having it in the past year. About if you don't fuck men. Wait, she does say something insane about how if you don't fuck men, they get violent. Oh, do you want me to go back and look for that? We'll read through real quick. All right. She says our society criminalizes sex and sweeps it under the rug. The consequences are straightforward. There is more violence. Since platforms like Craigslist were banned from advertising sex, serious violent crimes against all women, not just sex workers, has increased by nearly one-fifth. And men who do not have sex suffer. They are less likely to be a part of the labor force and more likely to experience depression, nihilism, and other mental health issues. I did read a little bit of this before, and I'm trying to be as charitable as possible, but it's kind of bad. It's kind of bad. So, here's the problem. You're not framing this accurately at all. It took off incorrectly, and it continued to be incorrect. It just goes from bad to worse. You're not saying that men who want sex, not having sex, increases their likelihood or affinity for violence, right? Which, even that I could argue. But that's not even what you're saying. What you're literally saying is that men who don't have sex are more prone to violence. And I just don't think that's true. Not by itself, at least, because you have to actually want sex, right? We're not going to force people to do things they don't want because we think it'll make them less violent. So that's issue number one. Number two is you have to be careful about how you word these things because MGTOW and the like they will latch onto this like a fucking parasite, and they will feed off of it, okay? The MGTOW boys are hungry. They are always hungry and thirsty for those delicious niblets that they can find of affirmation for their beliefs, right? We need to be careful. So yeah, it goes on. The hashtag #MeToo movement accomplished so much, and we have to take the next step. Normalizing having healthy, positive, consensual sex. Decriminalizing sex work, funding sex education, and creating outreach programs that help young people develop healthy sexual habits. 1000% agreed with that. We should be moving toward a right to sex. Listen. Nobody has a right to sex because sex requires at least 2 consenting people. And if you need 2 consenting people, you do not have a right to that thing. If we ever invent sex robots and we consider that sex, then sure. If we are considering masturbation sex, then sure. But from what I've seen, we do not typically consider those things sex. We consider that a sex toy, and we consider that masturbation. Very different things. So, again, I'm trying to be charitable. I want to say I know what she means, but she didn't think this one through. I think she should have left this one in the drafts and had a second look at it. You know? We need to bring this discussion to the spotlight. Normalizing a healthy, positive sex will have too many downstream benefits to list. We need to move past our history of shame. It's time to bring sex into the light. Agreed again, but like, man, boy, are you selling me a mixed bag of Barry Bott's every flavored beans from the turf book, you know? I don't know what I'm going to get next. Like, I agree with some of this, but man, you gotta be consistent. So yeah, now that I'm looking at it, it changes the trajectory of the way I was kind of going to take this segment. But I do still have a few points I want to make, so we'll get there. So as I said, the reading of the chart was bad. Her ideas were sussy at best and completely ludicrous at worst. I'm sorry, nobody has a right to sex. That's not a thing you have, okay? I'm sorry, MGTOW. No government-sanctioned sex partners for you. It is not going to happen. Get good, son, but also we will talk about you. We will come back to you, my sweet summer children, okay? Don't worry. Okay. Vaush retweets, this is a serious sociological problem, and the response I've seen from many leftists has been disheartening. I'd like to talk about why in a short thread, thankfully. Well, it's a little longer than I thought. I try to keep my threads when I post to Twitter very, very short. If you can't make your point in a very limited space, then don't make it. Anyway. First of all, he says, nothing that I'm about to say suggests an entitlement to sex or women's bodies. Obviously, nobody should ever feel pressured to have sex with a man just because men as a group are more socially isolated. Everyone should be free to choose their partners. Good start. That said, and here we go. Prolonged virginity can point to increased social alienation, an increase in which has been observed in both men and women through multiple trends. Average number of friends being a big one. Men seem to be experiencing more alienation, though. This can be attributed to many things, primarily gendered socialization. Women often have an easier time forming friend groups, and men are taught to be more emotionally distant and individualistic. This can manifest in a lot of really negative ways for men's mental health. Speaking as a man who's had all sorts of friends, it's not hard to see a pattern of men, especially cisgender heterosexual men, being more closed off and less willing to express enthusiasm when hanging out or making new friends. I agree with this. I felt this growing up. There's definitely an apprehension, at least for me personally, that came with social situations, even when it was with other guys, but especially with other women. I was terrified of women. But even with other guys, I was kind of scared of them too, because I didn't want to come off as like weird, not manly enough, stuff like that. I don't want to come off as like not one of the guys, I guess. And I know this happens in women groups, in women's groups as well. But I don't know. I definitely felt it as a man growing up. I can't speak to how similar the experiences are or compare the experiences between men and women. So anyway, it's practically a stereotype for dude bro friends to be so reserved with their feelings that they have to mask genuine emotion and emotional movements or sincere affection or appreciation towards other men being behind a veil of irony because it would be weird and quote unquote gay to be sincere. If these behavior patterns are causing mass social alienation, making it harder for men to form relationships, that's a real sociological problem. It's a gendered problem. Progressives should take it seriously. I do agree with this take, by the way. I do agree. So, there is an issue with young men being socially isolated and socially ostracized. And frankly, a lot of leftists don't help. And this is part of why I do what I do. I kind of take after Hassan in this way, Hassan Piker, because he has this goal as well. He wants to be a masculine kind of guy that can appeal to a younger male audience and show them that you don't have to be like a pussy bitch ass, whatever, SJW. Oh, we're soying out with the women's rights and we're kneeling to kiss the feet of women. Like, no, only do that if you have a kink for it. I don't kink shame, but we don't do that as a policy, right? I want to be one of those guys. I want to be a guy that can show young men that feminism is kind of pog, that being in favor of women's rights is good for all of us. And the only way we can do that is by opening up our space to some of these people and making it more appealing to them. Now, I'm not saying that we let full-blown incels into our doors. We don't do that, okay? Once you are a zombie and can no longer be saved, we don't let the zombies in. But for those who have only just begun the transformation process into a zombie that we can still save, pull them in and help them. And then they can be added to our ranks to fight against the other full-on zombies, right? That's a pretty good comparison. I came up with that off the cuff. But you guys get my point, right? I think that's important. Because the zombies in this case are alt-right men, okay? Overwhelmingly men. It happens with women too, but let's be honest with ourselves. Overwhelmingly men. We got Ben Shapiro. We got Matt Walsh. We got Steven Crowder. Various others that I can't think of right now. There are quite a few entry points for the alt-right. Okay? And we need to combat that. We need to open up the entry points for young men. Otherwise, what happens is we get a bunch of little Ben Shapiro worshipping goblins. And then they grow up and become more alt-righters, more influential alt-righters that seek only to do bad things. Continuing. I see a cavalcade of so-called progressives who seem to assume the only possible explanation for this trend is that men are shit and that women are tired of them. That it's men's fault and they need to correct this problem on their own. How is that a progressive response? 100% agreed as well. There are many, many women who uphold toxic masculinity. It happens. TERFs, very great example. Think about it. TERFs point at people that they think are trans, people that they clock, right? And point at things that they assume to be masculine traits. Think square jaws, broad shoulders. Maybe they got a little facial hair, right? Women get that. Maybe they're going bald. Women get that as well. Not commonly, but they do. Maybe they have bushy eyebrows. Like all these different... one time they got mad at the logo with the big nose, right? The women's logo, whatever it was, the Women's Center or whatever. Which, by the way, was a side profile of one of the women that was mad at it. I don't know if it was literally taken from her, but it was a dead-on match, which was hilarious to me. So, there are women, my point being, there are women who uphold this, okay? So, let's keep going. We're almost done with Vaush. Gendered socialization is just one aspect of this problem. There are many others, economic insecurity making men feel like they can't provide for a partner, modern dating culture and dating apps being a few others, and they're worth taking seriously. Is it not the responsibility of the progressive to examine sociological problems and address them? Not to mention if lonely men see us mocking them for their loneliness, who else will they turn to for answers? Who will they end up blaming? Please take this stuff seriously, or at least don't use it as an excuse to mock men for being lonely. Not every lonely guy is intolerable and unkind to women. They could just be anxious or asocial or depressed or autistic or poor and overworked. Come on. I really don't see anything wrong with this take, to be honest. I think it's a good take. It's just something that I've been saying. If they're nice guys, they aren't going to change their position. I'm not saying take nice guys, right? Quote unquote nice guys or incels. I'm not saying take them and try to convert them. I'm saying catch them before it even happens. I'm saying appeal to young men, appeal to a younger male audience. Pull them in before somebody like fucking Andrew Tate does. That makes sense. Why would we not want to add to our ranks? I'm sorry, but we kind of need more guys like me. Not to toot my own horn, but the issue is, again, I'm going to go in circles, but these young men go to Ben Shapiro. They go to Matt Walsh otherwise, and we don't want that. Like I said, I agree with Vaush's take here. Shark. Oh, hold on. Oh yeah, this is the decline in friendship. I was going to touch on this, but honestly, the only thing I want to say about the decline in friendship thing is that it's just indicative of kind of the same social problem, right? I think it's a deeper problem than just being able to catch them before it's too late. It's a whole structural problem, you know? But we're not going to change the structure overnight. So it's a band-aid solution while we find while we work toward a broader alternative. You know what I mean? It's, again, if we go back to the zombie thing that I was saying, the solution is not to save people who have been bitten by zombies. It's to nuke the zombies, right? It's to get rid of them. Make sure that there are no more zombies that can bite people. But we can't get rid of the zombies with limited people, right? We need to build our ranks. And part of that is, frankly, pulling in young, cishet white men. We have to do that. Misogyny needs to be fought first before we worry about sympathy for men. Sorry. You can do both. Listen, I'm not saying that Ali is crying and Tina too on twitch.tv need to go on every single stream and appeal to young white men. I'm sorry, like that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I'm one of the guys who needs to do that. Because if they're young white men and their idea of women is already kind of skewed, then they're not going to really listen to women. You know? Like, I'm one of the guys that needs to do that. I am doing that. Yeah, I am doing that. All I'm saying is I feel like a lot of leftists add to the problem, quite frankly. You know? And I'm guilty of it as well. I'm not saying that I'm not guilty of it. I make fun of incels all the time. I think it's warranted, frankly. You know? There are some guys that just aren't worth saving. But if we can be super cool like dudes who rip on these incels, rip on these beta males who think that they know more about women and more about gender and more about sex, even though they don't get any, than we do. If we can make them look foolish, then we win. We pull over those other dudes who otherwise would be going down the alt-right pipeline. I think we can all agree on that. I think it's just a thin line sometimes because men's issues are so often only brought up to talk back to feminists. This is true. That's why we, quite honestly, I would love to reclaim the term men's rights, because men's rights are intertwined with women's rights. They have to be. I actually signed up today to go on Jubilee for to be a male feminist on there, one of the 3 male feminists. And then there are going to be 3 male anti-feminists. So we'll see. It's not a sure thing yet, but I did apply. So we'll see if they get back to me. But one of the things I want to say is feminism is also about men's rights. It is true men's rights because we break down the gendered stereotypes and men can be free to express their feelings. Men can grow up and play with girls' toys and wear girls' clothes if they want to and wear makeup and wear, high heels if they want, or even beyond just wearing and playing with things. You know, emotionally, they'll be so much more fulfilled. I've said this before. Men are hollow shells, oftentimes, of what humans are supposed to be. Just the other night, I cried on stream, and I felt silly afterwards. I felt silly after that. Why? I shouldn't feel like that. That was a righteous cry that I had. Okay? Righteous. It was a righteous cry, dude. But it was, like, I was feeling it. You know? And that's fine. That's okay. But even more than that, like, helping other people. You know, sticking up for minorities is often seen as like a beta thing to do. And I don't like that. I think my problem is people see takes like this and assume it's the feminist fault. See, that's where, again, men like me come in, where we say, no, feminism is cool. Feminism is rad. Of course, there are weirdo feminists. There are weirdo men. There are weirdo Republicans that I'm sure you're aware of, right? Things that people who are supposedly on your side say that you don't like. You're correct. And I would agree with you. But overall, if you look at feminism as a definition and its goal, you should agree with it. And if you don't, you're just kind of a psycho. You know? Ask them sometimes. Point out to me what exactly you don't like about feminism. The answer is always something like, oh, well, I just don't think that women should be, given special privileges. And I think that Stacey goes after Chad instead of going after the computer nerds. And I just don't like that. It's stupid shit that you can easily tear apart. Like, address it one point at a time. And if you can't convince them, you'll at least convince the rest of your audience, some of whom might be young males. Let's move on to Alexandra Hunt's longer statement. See my statement on the topic of young men having less sex here. It's very long. We'll go through it real quick. First, I want to make something clear. I do not believe sex can exist without consent, period. Good start. I do not believe sex workers have an obligation to help or support anyone but themselves. As a sex worker and someone who has experienced sexual violence, I'm acutely aware of the ever-present risks of sexual violence facing anyone who is not a cishet man who dares to have sex in our society. I'd like to discuss a very important, albeit nuanced issue, rates of sex among men. Now, before you groan and call me names, hear me out. I want to create an environment where everyone feels confident, comfortable, and competent having sex, safe sex with affirmative consent. No, this does not mean we should force women to, quote, service, unquote, violent men. I am envisioning a world where young men are good in bed. You see, young men just aren't having as much sex as they used to. A Washington Post article showed a surprising decline in sexual activity among men aged 18 to 30 years old. Why does this matter? Well, research shows that when men, and particularly young men, aren't having sex, they have more anxiety and depression, fewer meaningful romantic relationships and friendships, less in participation in the workforce, and a declining rate of college attendance, and lower rates of home ownership. I know what you're thinking. Alexandra, you are a feminist. Why do you care about young men having less sex? I care because I know it's a sign of a much deeper issue hurting everyone in our country. That issue is class warfare. We are seeing the most extreme wealth gaps between generations in our country's history, and the impact is so severe that even young men who have previously thrived in a country built for their success are feeling the pressure. Stress is a pretty major cock block, as most women know. Very interesting choice of words. Very brave. The recipe for a country where all of us can have healthy, consensual, satisfying sex includes economic opportunity and affordable housing. It also includes expanding and protecting access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care for anyone who wants it, as well as funding medically accurate, comprehensive, age-appropriate sex education. Sex and masturbation are considered taboo and criminal topics, making them issues that politicians do not want to touch. But we need to talk about sex to address the issues that make healthy, consensual sex, consensual, satisfying sex a possibility for all. The hashtag #MeToo movement brought a lot of awareness and education around the topic of consent. The evangelical movement brought a lot of shame and stigma around the topic of sex. Sex is a good thing when done in a healthy, consensual, satisfying manner. A lot of men are unsure of how to have this good sex because they've never been properly educated. The practice of affirmative consent can seem daunting, and the shame and stigma surrounding sex cuts off conversation and resources that could allow men to become better partners. We've done a good job telling men what they shouldn't do, but who's telling men what they should do? As someone who has sex with men, I would love for responsibility of educating young men on how to be respectful, communicative, satisfying sexual partners to be on our government rather than on me. Well put. I think that's well put. She did not address the mistake that she made in the statistics, but we'll let it slide. I do think that was much better. I think she's right. In this aspect, she's right. I think she needed to choose her words more carefully before. She did clarify that what she means by sex should be a right. I think she meant that sex education should be a right and sex protection should be a right. And men, particularly when we're focusing on men, should know what they're doing, right? Because I'll tell you this, I had no fucking clue what I was doing the first time I had sex. Not a bit. That was my ex. And my ex broke up with her boyfriend to be with me. And it was after about a week of them being apart, we were watching Spirited Away. That was the first night I ever kissed a girl. That was also the night I lost my virginity. She told me that night what a horrible kisser I was. And the only thing that I knew about sex, the only thing was that I remember knowing that men do not last long enough, that women always want to go longer, that women are in it for the long haul. Once they get rolling, they don't stop. A moving train stops for nobody and nothing, right? And that was women. And I, the febile man, was but a sputtering engine, a burst of flames that quickly puttered out. Unless. So what I did was, I purposefully held my cum, right? On top of, it's not that it wasn't good, but it was the first time for me. And so it was unfamiliar. But on top of being unfamiliar, I also literally physically held my cum. And I held it for so long that it became too long. And we just kept going. And well, she was, I think, jerking me off. I don't think we had no, we did vaginal. We did vaginal. So we just kept going and going and going and going. And nothing happened. And she's like, am I doing a bad job? And I'm like, no, it's fine. I don't know. 15 minutes had passed, 20 minutes had passed, still nothing. 25 minutes had passed, still nothing. And by this point, I had kind of clogged the gears. The gears could no longer turn because the cum was too stuck inside of them. So I'm sitting here with clogged gears, not just a stiffy, not able to just release. And, it finally did happen, at 30, 35 minutes in. But, oh boy, that shot up like a fucking rocket. Let me tell you something. That hurt like a fucking bitch. All right. And I knew nothing about foreplay. I knew nothing about aftercare. Everything that I know about sex was Googled. Everything. Nobody told me this shit. And that's not a mistake that I will personally be making with my kids. I will not sit there and like tell them things that they did not want to hear from me. If they don't want to hear it, I won't tell them, but I will tell them, hey, maybe you should look up this and this and that. You know, that's just like for me. Like, I want to make sure that when I have kids and they grow up, like they enjoy themselves. I don't want their first experience to be like mine. It's always going to be a little awkward, but you should at least know what you're doing going in, right? Like, you should know a little bit. Anyway. Let's move on to Shark's take, something that Vaush himself retweeted. As a guy who always had more difficulty dating and making connections than my peers through life, these convos about loneliness in men always hurt more. A lot of people just don't care. A lot just have their own narrative. I've spoken to so many dudes who feel the same, and people who speak on the issue just want to jump to their own conclusions about it. It's either they're all watching Peterson and Tate and want to strangle a girl to death, or it's feminism and #MeToo that's ruined everything. Honestly, with so many tries and fixing so many issues within my own grasp, I think it's just better to just give up. It's not impossible, but at this point, the pain of rejection, scrutiny, and loss for the millionth time, it's less harmful to just give up. Sometimes it's better to have never have loved at all. Keeping it at arm's length hurts for longer, but it's less intense and with it already not working. So if everything stays the same, it feels better. Know when to fold and maybe it's just time to get up from the table and go home. For some reason, people read this bit as me saying #MeToo is bad. This is me criticizing how both people who say this is a Peterson-Tate issue or a #MeToo issue are wrong and completely missing the point. He continues. Okay, no, he doesn't continue. He jumps back. I think the way I'm reading this is a vent post. This seems like a vent thread for Shark. Yes? And while I don't agree I don't agree that it's better to just give up, it does feel that way for men sometimes, you know? When you're not given the tools to do the thing that you're told you need to do at some point, it can feel like you're digging a 5 mile tunnel with your bare hands, you know? And that's very hard. Honestly, when I was alone, I was okay. I was single for a long ass time and it was okay. I think there's a narrative that men do not, this goes into the whole, like, men who fuck a lot of women are seen as alphas and women who fuck a lot of men are seen as like whores, right? It kind of plays into that because men are expected to find a woman and have sex. Women are, but if you're not having sex as a woman, there's not as much societal pressure to just get laid already. I feel like. I'm not a woman, so I could be wrong, but you know, that's kind of how I see it. Unfortunately, we live in a society that values female purity or whatever you want to call it, like women virginity. It's really gross, but that's just how it is. A lot of straight men literally rely on women as a sole source of emotional support, which is bad. Yes. Men would literally rather emotionally torment and even physically torment in some cases their own wives and girlfriends and or female friends than seek therapy. And that's a problem. Okay? It's a huge problem. I wasn't any dude support for the first time in years. Yeah, so like here's why this is an issue for all of us. This isn't just a men's problem. This is an all of us problem. Because those men, quite frankly, grow up to ruin people's lives. You know? And I'm not saying that it's all society's fault or it's all women's fault or it's not all men's fault. Like, it's all of us. Okay? It's if we consider ourselves leftists, if we consider ourselves progressives, we should be able, of anybody, to understand the difference between personal responsibility, which exists in this case, don't get me wrong, and societal trends. And right now we are seeing a dangerous societal trend of young men who do not know how sex works or how relationships with women work, right? Young, straight, cis men. I blame capitalism for this gigantic divide between the genders. Absolutely, that's part of it. But I think, but even before capitalism, it existed. Capitalism definitely exacerbated it. So, how are we going to wrap all of this up? I think, first of all, Alexandra Hunt's first take was garbage. Let's make that perfectly and unambiguously clear. Her first take was all over the place. I think I know what she was getting at. I think that she clarified it very well in her follow-up post, which I completely agree with pretty much on every level. I think that Vaush's take on how we look at this as progressives is also true. I don't mind. I'm not going to be a little snowflake, prissy bitchy soy boy who's like, oh no, we need to be nice to the incels. We need to coddle. No, fuck that. They're incels. Okay. Fuck them. But what I will say is there are young men who have legitimate problems who, here, I'll pull up my take. Actually, I got a take on this. Hold on. It was in response to young Joel or Big Joel. So Big Joel says, I am Muslim and needs to be interrogated in this, quote, men are having less sex right now crisis, unquote, is the question. How much sex should they be having? Is it just the amount they had in the past? Who decides? I think that's not the correct question. I think we're not looking. The question is not, are men having enough sex? It's why aren't men who want sex having sex, right? That's the big question. I said a big thing people aren't bringing up is education on dating and sex. As a young man, I was terrified of women and thought any advances I made would come off as creepy. Young men need positive influences to ensure they're socially capable of attaining and maintaining relationships. This is not to say men aren't responsible for their own destiny, but as leftists, we should be consistent in our approaches to such issues. And just saying a skill issue when young men have very real struggles with sex isn't helping. It's only adding to the incel ranks, right? Vaush should have said progressive men because the assumption is always that it's women's responsibility. No, it's not the women. I think that Vaush, if he wanted to, could have said that like progressive male influencers have a big role to play in this, because that is one thing that I think is crucial. Unfortunately, the society we live in, does not value women's voices and women's opinions as much as men's. I think we agree on that, right? By virtue of being born with a ball and dick, a ball, two balls, I swear there's two down there, a dick and balls, I have been granted the illustrious honor of being listened to more than people with vagubers, okay? That's just how the world turns right now. But that's what we're trying to fix, okay? So I do think that there is an element that needs to be added to all of this, and that is that it is incumbent upon leftist men like me to ensure that young men who are lost, who have lost their way, my young pre-incel boys, right, to get back on the right path, to make sure that they don't turn into hateful human beings. Okay? That's important. So let's not lose that. Right? Let's remember that because men are explicitly and unambiguously more listened to and more respected than women, we have more responsibility in this. That's important to remember. And I do stand by that. On the other hand, you are not free from my clutches yet, women. You also have responsibility in this. We all of us, all right, all of us, regardless of our genders, need to make sure that we are fostering a community that is accepting to these young men, that we are not gatekeeping, right? Now, when I say gatekeeping, once again, I want to stress, we are not letting the zombies pass the barrier, right? We are bringing people who have been afflicted by them, who can still be saved, who maybe are treading down that path but have not yet fulfilled it, right? Pre-incels, people who don't understand, who weren't raised properly, who didn't have an environment that fostered that goodness, right? Frankly, like me, you know, I think that my environment, my circumstances could have been better for that. I think I got very morally lucky to be where I am right now. I'll be honest. You know, I used to be a conservative. I think there is a universe where I went full incel. Okay. And I don't like that. I don't like thinking about that. And that's an embarrassing thing to admit, but you know, we all need to understand ourselves to be prone to that kind of stuff. Let me wrap this up because this is longer than I meant it to be. As I said, all of us as leftists, but especially men, we need to do a better job of making sure that we are fostering an environment that is welcoming, not catering, mind you, but welcoming to young cishet men, and to be frank, cishet white men, and that we're not lobbing books at them all the time to read up on gender theory, or telling them that they just need to read, they need to educate themselves, or that, you know, because they don't know this or they don't understand that they're being bigots, whatever. Like, if they're being a bigot, call it out, fine. But I think there are better ways to handle some of these conversations that, frankly, I just don't see a whole lot of, unfortunately. So I know that can be difficult. It can be a difficult line to kind of toe, but we should try. Because once again, the alternative is more alt-right people, more alt-right men. And we don't, who wants that? Nobody. We don't need that shit. So, I don't know. Hopefully we all learned something here. If not, then whatever. Just giving my 2 cents. All that being said, if you are one of the young men watching me and you think that I'm soy as fuck, take a minute to think about it. Take a minute to think about what I've said here. And if you want to have more conversations about it, you can in the YouTube comments. I will be responding to comments. And you can also hit me up in the DMs in my Discord, which will be in my description. You know, my DMs are open on Twitter as well. I mean, they would be if I had a Twitter, which I don't, of course. But you can find the link to somebody's Twitter in my description as well. And we can talk. Mano y mano, one-on-one. And if you'd like to come on my live stream and have a conversation, you're more than welcome to do that as well. I am not typically open to DMing people who disagree with me, but I'm making an exception in this case because I want to stand by my word. If you do not want to be in the public eye and you have honest to God questions, honest to God criticisms of anything that I've said and you want to talk about it, my DMs are open. DM me. We will fix you, brother. Or, you know, at least talk. I don't want to be condescending. Maybe I'll learn something from you as well. Who knows? Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like. Please be sure to hit the bell and subscribe if you would like to see more. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Tell me what you thought of the video. Leave a lovely little comment for me. Lovely little comment to show me that you have brain wrinkles. For every comment you leave on one of my videos, you get a new wrinkle in your brain. Did you know that? Factually true. You get a new wrinkle. And soon your brain will look just as shriveled as a raisin, except bigger. Raisins are small. Your brain's big because you're here. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you again for watching. And I hope to see you not only in the next video, but also on my chat. But also in the next video. Goodbye.